Hey guys, Instructor Pilot Chris here. Today we will be talking about batteries. I have a list here. It's going to save you a lot of time covering some highlights regarding batteries. If you're new to the hobby industry, this will be helpful for you. If you used to be in the hobby industry and you've come back, a lot has changed, and so this will also be helpful for you. And then sometimes these things are just a good reminder, even if you're in the hobby space currently. So I'll cover those items, but I think this will save you some time. My goal was to consolidate the message, but primarily cover Lipo batteries, charging batteries, and then some different tips and tricks that might help you out. First thing maybe to talk about is, a lot of people have batteries like this, for example, in their house, alkaline battery. That's not what we're talking about. Most of these are not rechargeable. However, they will tell you if they are. They're usually nickel metal, but that is not what we're talking about. These batteries are not sufficient, and they do not have the energy density that we need for our hobby equipment. So instead, today we will be talking about Lipo batteries. And as you see, we have a variety of batteries, but I only have one big charger primarily that I'll be talking about. We do have an example of some other chargers just for reference, but we'll get right to it. So what is a Lipo? That's commonly what you hear, Lipo, and as you see, we have different sizes dependent on the usage. So oftentimes the bigger the aircraft, the bigger the battery, the more power that is needed. Whereas if something like this, obviously this isn't going to work. This is actually pretty heavy, and so we would have a smaller battery that's appropriate for the unit in question. But the makeup of the battery itself is more or less the same. So that's what I was going to cover first. What is a Lipo battery? Lithium polymer is the official name. High energy dense battery that allows for not only charging but discharging. And discharging meaning either through usage in your actual aircraft, or the charger itself will permit discharging. And we'll talk about why you would do that and how that's actually really important and something that will save you money. So we'll cover that in a second. One other thing to talk about is what makes these up. What's the components inside here? So obviously Lipo is lithium. There's a big component. These are all not necessarily rare metals, but they are in high demand, especially with usage in cell phones and vehicles across the board because they have such fantastic performance. You're seeing these in all your electronics, your iPads and such. So they are in critical demand, and therefore they are kind of expensive. And the bigger the battery, the more expensive it is. Off the top of my head, I think this is probably $15 or so, versus a battery like this might be $30 to $45 just because of the metal components. So in addition to lithium, there are a couple other metals that are typically involved: cobalt, nickel, and manganese. So those are usually the high components inside these batteries. And something to call out that's really great about these is the density. So when we talk about that, we all know that these are kind of like throwaway batteries, these typical A's, and a lot of appliances and whatnot at home. We would have these at home. They're not suitable for what we use for the hobby industry. They don't have enough longevity or power. But as an example, oftentimes lithium batteries will have a multiple of power. So think about it like a gas tank. If this was a gas tank that lets you do something for a minute, this here might let you do it for 3 to 4 minutes. There's a lot more density for the same size battery. These are superior because of the components, the metals that are involved. One other thing that's really great about lithium batteries is if you start to go down the rabbit path of batteries, you're going to start hearing about efficiency. And there's a lot to this. We're not going to get in the weeds on any of this. This is just a high-level concept. But in terms of efficiency, we're talking about charging and loss of energy typically due to heat. So something like this, an average battery that, if this was rechargeable, would often generate a lot of heat due to resistance in the charge. And so it's a loss of energy both in charging and discharging or using it. Whereas these batteries are very efficient, minimal heat loss. And so that loss of heat would typically reduce performance. But in this case, you get to use more of the energy into the product or into flying. And that's what we all want. We want more power for our electric motors. We want longer durations of flight time. So that's why it's so important that primarily across the hobby, you will see LiPo batteries used because of their efficiency. Something else that, along with the efficiency, what's so great and what's allowed for these fantastic products is they're a lot smaller. So because they're so energy dense packed, if for example, if this was the equivalent of 3 or 4 of these, you can see how that would be a problem, right? Not only are the new LiPos very dense, but that allows for small battery packs that offer a lot of power. And so what you've seen over the last about 10, 15 years, more and more so, is these really cool little units that can be flown indoors, primarily because now we have an energy source that permits it. Not only has the electronic components, they've gotten smaller, but really the big component was the battery. 20 years ago, something like this might have existed, but maybe the flight time was so brief that it really wasn't worth it. And nowadays the batteries have gotten so good that these little aircraft can fly for 5-10 minutes doing aerobatics because of the density of the battery. So that's what's so cool, is because the battery technology has improved, so has the use case. And it's the same thing with the electric cars nowadays. They've improved from where they were 10, 15 years ago. All right, one thing that we'll call out here is something that you might experience if you're new to the hobby. And frankly, I was in the hobby a long time ago, and I made it back into the hobby, and a lot has changed. And so what you'll see here is a really old charger. And, chargers themselves haven't changed significantly. They have improved, but we'll talk about some things. What's important about a charger is that there's a source of power into the charger, and you can usually use a wall outlet, or there's a way to plug this into perhaps your car battery, but you need to have power going into your unit here, and then obviously you need to charge your actual battery, and so then you have to have power coming out of your charger into whatever is appropriate here. So what we'll be talking about is you can do various charger options. You can have a universal charger like this that is fully capable of charging just about every battery here. Or oftentimes you can save money and buy specific to the aircraft at hand. So for example, I just bought this blade, and if this was my only intention, I only wanted to fly this blade, I think this charger was like $10, right? And this charger will charge this battery pack. Now I had to use a separate iPhone USB to make this all happen. That was not included, but it's pretty dummy proof. It's cheap, it works. The only thing I'll caution you about is that oftentimes with a hobby, you'll start with what you first see, and it's kind of cool, and you buy just what you need for the moment. What I'd recommend is spend a little bit more money up front, and it'll save you more money in the long run. And what I mean by that is, rather than buy an individual charger per airplane or per battery, spend $50 to $100 and get a universal charger that will allow you to charge anything, right? And what's really good about that is the same thing with the actual power cords. And I'll show you how to use this in a second. But rather than just have one charge lead that is applicable to just one battery, if you get this universal link, instead of paying the $10 for just one cord, I think this was $20. And essentially you can charge every single modern battery that's in the hobby. And they're all different shapes. They're very similar, but the concept is the same. There's a positive and a negative charge lead. And then separately, you have a balancer. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. This is specific to LiPo batteries. But what's problematic for some people is they don't know. They'll order an aircraft, they'll get a battery, and maybe the lead is different from what they expected, and they don't have a charger. So if you get a universal lead like this, it kind of bypasses any problems you'll have. And as an example, you can see that typically the bigger batteries have bigger leads versus a smaller battery. They're different leads. So these are great. These universal chargers are great. Also, this battery or this charger allows batteries to be both charged and discharged. What I was saying a second ago, you can do two ways to discharge a battery. So typically, you would fully charge your battery, and you would go fly it, and maybe you'll just fly it until the battery's low, and put the airplane away for the day. Or maybe you'll fully charge it, and then a couple minutes into the flight, you'll land, and that way you'd have partial battery left. So that's one way to have partial battery. The other way to do it is you can use this charger to charge it up halfway, or if it's fully charged, you can discharge it halfway. The reason that's important, and the reason I said that would save you money, is I don't know if this is across the board with all batteries, but specifically with lithium. If you were to charge all these batteries and then just store them for a month, or it really doesn't need to be that long, I've read that it can be as short as a couple days to a week. There's a certain capacity of energy. And if you think about it like a balloon, if you fully charge this thing and then you put it away, and you have bad weather, or maybe summer or spring happen and you don't fly, it actually ruins the battery and it reduces the capacity. So there's kind of like it's kind of like a balloon almost, where if you blow it all the way up, it kind of loses that tension. And so what you don't want to do is have any of these fully charged and then store them long term. That's a really bad idea. So typically you'd want most of these batteries recommended half charged, and store them at half charged. That way, right before you go fly, and that's actually what we're doing today. In North Texas, we've had rain and wind and craziness for the last week, and so all my batteries are half charged. I stored them knowing that the weather would be poor. Well, we're looking at beautiful weather ahead of us, and so now today I'm charging everything, getting ready to use them. So it's not a big deal. It's just it does help to plan. It improves not only the capacity but the longevity of the battery, just like your cell phone. Very similar, where the way you charge your cell phone and the frequency and the usage will impact how long that battery works. But if you've had a cell phone battery for a couple of years, most people change after 6 months to 18 months. But if you did have a cell phone for maybe, call it 3 years, and there's a setting in there, and you can go check the battery health, at least on the iPhones, and you'll probably find that it's possible the battery health is down to like 80%. And what that means is that it's not going to stay charged as long. You'll fully charge it, but it doesn't hold as much energy as it did originally, and so you won't be able to use your phone as long, or in this case, you won't be able to fly as long. So instead of maybe 8 minutes, maybe you get to fly for 4. So that would be the reason on why you want to be very careful with charging your batteries to full charge and leaving them to sit. When you do charge a battery, there's some other important things to know, is that you don't want to fly anything and then charge it immediately. These will get warm. Batteries are releasing energy, and they will get warm, especially if you're flying aggressively, maximum discharge, where a lot of power is being drawn from these batteries. They will generate heat. You do not want to take a warm battery out of your aircraft and throw it on a charger. That's a really bad idea. It could possibly be hazardous in terms of it could be enough to set a fire, but it's a really bad practice. So oftentimes if I go flying, I'll just let the battery sit overnight and just be conservative and try to keep my batteries good, and then charge them the next day when they're already at room temperature. Now, there is something that's also very important with charging these, and that's why I'm making this video, because this is kind of overwhelming. If you're coming into this, there's a lot of different things here. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. With Lipo batteries, you're going to see a few things, and there's a few different settings that are pretty standard on most chargers. So one of them is the how many S, and S is actually representing cells. So think about like this is one cell, right? So these are flat battery packs, and there's a heat shrink, but you can't tell. This looks like one, but there's not. In this case, there's 3 individual cells. In this case, it's a bigger pack. There are 4 cells, or in this case, it truly is one, and you can kind of see that it is thinner. So in terms of charging, you have a couple different options on settings, and one of them that's important is the cell count and the milliamps. Those are 2 important things. So we'll explain that in a second why. If you're talking about cell count, if you only have one, it's as straightforward as it gets. Now, when you talk about more than one, in this case 3, if you're actually putting electrical power into this and you're charging this unit, you don't want one cell to be charging quicker than the others. It's important that they kind of balance and they charge at the same time and that they get full at the same time. So there's different versions nowadays where they might not have this cord. A charger might be smart enough that you don't need this, but for a lot of Lipo batteries, you do have what's called a balancing lead. And it's important that you plug both of these in. So red and black, positive and negative power lead, and then this is the charger balance lead. And this lead helps all 3 cells, or however many you have, charge at the same rate. So I'll give you an example of how to do that here in a second. The other really important thing is how quickly you charge this battery. And again, not only does this relate to longevity and battery health, but again, it could be a hazard. And, these are very safe when used appropriately. There are some things that are a really bad idea with lithium batteries, charge rates that are beyond what the manager or the manufacturer recommends. And in this case, to give you an example, it's important enough. This is this battery. This is the box it came in. Right on the box, it tells you what's the maximum rate in amps. So amperage is what we're really talking about. And the reason you might find yourself getting in trouble is you might be anxious to go fly. And so you're going to say, this is capable of putting a lot of power into this battery quickly. I'm going to do it as quickly as I can. Will it work? It probably will. It might generate a lot of heat. It might ruin the battery long term, but it probably will work. So what we're saying is this is a conservative, proper practice, is follow the manufacturer recommendation. Again, and just because it says maximum doesn't mean that's what we would do if we have all these batteries. In all, I've spent a lot of money on batteries. This is just a few of them, and I want them to last. I don't want to wait for shipments to arrive. And so even though it says a maximum charge rate, rule of thumb, and you can go on Reddit or wherever, Google this, but you're going to be talking about how many C's, charge rate, and 1 C is very common. And what that means is how quickly should you charge, how many amps should you use to charge your battery in 1 hour. And if you have a higher C, like 2C, that would be 30 minutes. 0.5 C, instead of being 1 hour, would be 2 hours. So it's the duration of how long does it take to charge. The quicker the charge, the higher the amps, the higher the resistance, higher the heat, and potential for damage. So we just recommend that you plan ahead, charge accordingly. I'll probably be flying this afternoon or tomorrow. I'm not in a hurry. That's why I got up this morning and I started charging, and I thought, hey, this is some good information to share, and so that's what I'm doing. So we'll go ahead and I'll give you an example. We're going to charge this one here. So going back to the 1C, and there's 3 cells. So we're going to say, we're going to pick 3 cells and 1C. It's not as straightforward as you might think. What we recommend is 1C is 1 amp per 1,000, right? So in this case, it's not quite 1,000, so maybe it's a 0.8. So just take however many milliamps in thousands, divide it by thousands, and then multiply that by amps. So for example, we got 2,200 here divided by 1,000, 2.2 amps, right? And I might just be even more conservative and just say it's 2 amps. Now, again, this will say 6.6, and you can do that, but I want this battery to perform. So we'll do 2 amps. But we're going to charge this one. And so when I talked about the balance lead, as you can see, this is all part of this dynamic charger, and there's different plugs depending on how many cells you have. It's a computer, and on its own, if you just put in how many cells and you plug the balance lead in the correct unit here, receptacle, and you have this plugged in with the correct amps, it will charge on its own. So we're going to do 3S, and this is a J connector, so I'll find the right connector here. Black on black, red on red. So now I'm connected. Okay, and on my charger, they're all going to be slightly different, but the same concept. I want to go to the count of cells, and again, we have 3. So 3 cells and amps. Like I said before, I'm going to do 1 amp per 1,000 milliamps. In this case, that's about 0.8. It's already in there. So we'll just hit start. There we go. Oftentimes, if something's wrong, it will start beeping at you. If your polarity, your positive, negative, are reversed, if you forget to put the balance lead in, but it will go ahead and it'll just start charging. And when it's done, at least on my charger, the clock here will stop. And that's about as easy as it gets. So when that clock stops, the battery's done. All right, one thing I'm going to talk about now that's really important is emergencies, right? It's always good to have, I talk about this a lot, contingency plans with aviation, not only with flying, whether it's a model or a full-size aircraft, but it's also important with all aspects of, even in this case, charging. This could be a hazard, right? So there's some things that we'd want to do, or at least be aware of, general knowledge. So as you can see, these are all flat battery packs. If damaged, let's say that you just happen to have one that had an incident in manufacturing, that had a defect, or more likely, let's say you drop this. Let's say you drop it on something hard, you don't really think anything of it, but you damage the internal components, and then you go and charge it. What you did with dropping this would be potentially really dangerous, and it could result in what's called puffing or swelling. And again, using that balloon analogy, this thing, as you're charging it, could start to expand. That is very, very dangerous. It's recommended that you have a fire envelope to put that in, but whatever you do, get it outside of the house. You do not want this in the house. You definitely want to remove it from the charger and discontinue its use, and then dispose of it as advised by the manufacturer. You definitely don't want to just throw this in your garbage, but you primarily, immediately, you do not want a fire on your hands. So remove the power source if it's being charged, discontinue charging, and get the actual component outside of your house where you don't want to start a fire. So then after that, take the time to learn how to dispose of this properly. I think Best Buy and some other retailers will actually recycle batteries, so just inquire as needed, but certainly don't throw these in the trash. The reason that you wouldn't want to just throw these in the trash, there is the environmental concern. Equally important is, again, fire risk. If this is puffing and you were to go throw this in a garbage can, there's a good chance you're going to set everything on fire. And this has actually been a big problem with electric vehicles recently, where it's kind of new technology, and the old practices for putting out a fire don't necessarily work real well. And the example is, if you're going to, usually if you have a fire, a lot of people will throw water on a fire to put it out. That's not necessarily a great idea with a metal battery fire. That could actually aggravate the situation and make it worse. So in the actual instructions here, there is a reference to a Class D Delta fire extinguisher, and essentially it's like a granular powder. So it's almost like a powder that you're spraying, and that's specifically for metal fires. So, if you want to see what happens by putting water on a lithium metal, you can Google that, or just look up electric car fire, and you'll see it's pretty spectacular. And in some cases, it's so bad that a fire department might just let it burn out on its own because they don't have the means to extinguish it. So it's a very serious thing with lithium batteries. You certainly don't want to put these things in your pockets, and then you go do your laundry and you forget about it. There are simple things that are practices that you should do for safety. So that's about it for safety. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that don't try to put out a metal fire with water. I think I covered the big details here. I hope you learned something. Anytime there's technology that's new, either in the market or new to you, I encourage you to at least follow what the manufacturer suggests. And again, the elements are safety, and then also just prolonged usage and enjoyment of your hobby. I'd like to get 50 charges or so or uses out of these batteries, and if I can do something like that, then my cost per flight drops significantly. My actual cost per flight is really low. It's really low cost entertainment. And then again, just going back to a lot of these things are shipped to you, so it avoids frequency of going to either Amazon or Horizon Hobby and ordering batteries that may or may not be in stock and waiting for them. So it's always good just to take care of what you have so that you can enjoy it. I hope you learned something, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next one.